Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys swinging by the channel to check out today's video, because we're going to be talking about the most common mistakes anglers make fishing jigs. There's a lot of misconceptions with jig fishing. A lot of guys have problems with it. A lot of guys struggle to catch bass on jigs. And there's probably about, I'm going to guess, a half a dozen reasons why I think a lot of people really have a tough time with it. So we're going to go over each one of those problem areas, give you guys some tips and advice to get you some confidence in jigs, because, man, in my opinion, they are, if not the number one all-time bass fishing lure, they're definitely in the top 2 or 3. So we're going to get into that in today's episode. And also, guys, the jig we're talking about today is my Blaukat throwback jig here from Cumberland Pro Lures. Living rubber jig, which is the best skirt material, hand-tied skirt. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description on my jig here if you guys like to order some. And also, I'd like to invite everybody to please consider hitting that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling. It's free and easy. Sharing the videos, liking the videos is a good way to help out, so I really appreciate that. Okay, we talk about jigs and jerkbaits a lot on this channel here for good reason, because they are just incredible fish catching baits. They catch quality fish, they catch lots of fish, fun to fish. Man, there's nothing that can beat a good jig bite, guys. If you get to be a good jig fisherman and you're pitching and flipping that jig into around a boat dock or shallow cover or bush, and you see that line jump and set the hook, it's just got to be one of the funnest ways to catch fish. But a lot of people have a hard time with jigs. I hear people say all the time, it's like, man, I can catch them on a Texas rig worm, but I just can't catch many fish on a jig. So we're going to talk about why you're not catching many fish on a jig. First of all, one of the big problems people have is they don't use the right color, or they don't match it with the right trailer. Jig fishing is very color sensitive in terms of water clarity. So you have to really match your water clarities to the color jig that you use. Certain jigs work better at different times of the year. Overall, I sort of have a pretty simple rule of thumb with this. If the water visibility is, say, over 3 foot in clarity, I'm using some type of a brown or brown and orange or green, some type of a more natural subdued color. And if the water visibility is under 3 feet, depending upon how dirty it actually gets, I'm usually using a little bit brighter color, like, maybe, black and blue like this, or, maybe some type of a black and chartreuse if the water's really dirty. So, and matching the trailer with the right trailer is also critical too. And a lot of that is experimentation, but overall, the 3 main jig colors I use are some type of a brown, which I usually pair with a green pumpkin, black and blue that I pair with a blue trailer, and then the black and chartreuse that I pair with a solid black trailer. So that's one big mistake a lot of people make, is they choose the wrong jig color and trailer for the water that they're fishing. Another big mistake that people make with jigs is they don't work the jig right. A jig is a lure that you can catch fish on it, just dragging along the bottom or hopping it or whatever. But one of the things that will really help you in jig fishing is if you learn to hop this jig high off the bottom. Now football head jigs are different. You're just dragging it along the bottom. And finesse jigs, a lot of time, you're just sort of shaking them along the bottom. But with a full size jig like this, you really need to do a hop on the thing. So I like to, throw it out there, and when I'm working it, I'll pop it off the bottom like that. So the jig's like working down the bottom like this, and then I'll pop it maybe a foot or so off the bottom. And a lot of times on the bigger profile jig like this, when you hop that lure like a foot off the bottom, it'll create a reaction strike. And it's the same whether I'm fishing a clean bottom or if I'm in cover. So I do that if I'm fishing just rocks, or if I pitch into a lay down tree or a dock or something, I'll hop it the same way and catch a lot of fish doing that. So that working that jig is a really good way to do it. Another problem people have with jigs is they don't fish them really in the right type of cover that you need to fish. For the most part, you're going to do a lot better on a jig fishing it around some type of cover than you are just in open water. Now, the exception to that would be dragging a football head jig, just like on a bare point or something. But when you're talking about a more standard casting, pitching, and flipping jig, you always want to try to get it into some complex type cover. So this could be like, getting it way back up underneath the boat dock, flipping it into some cattails or reeds or flooded grass, or flipping it into a lay down tree or a flooded tree. But that is one of the big keys on jig fishing, is you're going to get a lot more bites if you fish it around some type of heavy cover. And also with a jig, you will get more bites on a jig if the bait is hanging over something. So in other words, If you got a limb right here and that line is hanging over the limb, by hanging over the limb and you sort of jigging that bait up and down over that limb, that creates a lot of strikes you can get on a jig with that. Another mistake a lot of people make on jigs is they don't fish them long enough. A jig is a commitment. You're not going to get as many bites normally on a jig that you will something else. It's like if you and I are fishing, say we're fishing docks or whatever, and I've got a full-size jig on and you've got a shaky head or pitching a 6-inch worm or a little creature bait, you're probably going to get more bites than I do. But at the end of the day, the 5 fish that I catch versus the 5 fish that you catch, my 5 fish are going to be heavier on the jig. So you sort of have to make a mental shift when you're jig fishing, knowing that you're not going to get quite as many bites. Another mistake people make with jigs is they use too light a line. You can use heavy line with a full-size jig, and probably, I'm going to guess, 90% of the time when I'm fishing my throwback jig, I've got either 20 to 25 pound test Seagart and Vizex fluorocarbon line on it. Now, the reason behind that's a couple different things. I like the way a jig falls on heavier line. It has more of a horizontal fall, slows the fall just a little bit, so I can use heavier jigs and I can still slow the fall. But for some reason, it's like I see a lot of people trying to fish jigs on 12 and 15 pound test line, the full-size jigs, and there's no reason to do that. I just get more bites, I land more fish, I'm more efficient, fishing it with the heavier line. And finally, guys, using the right rod on this is important too. You always want to fish a full-size jig on a flipping stick. You need that power, because a lot of times on a jig, what happens is when you get a big fish, it comes up, it'll inhale the whole jig in its mouth, just like that, and it'll hold it and it'll clamp down on it. If you don't have a powerful rod that can move that lure through the fish's mouth, what happens is you'll set the hook on like a lighter action rod or 7-foot rod, and you don't do anything. You don't move the jig at all, and all of a sudden that fish swims away with it, just opens its mouth, and a jig comes out of its mouth. So you want to make sure that you have heavy line and a heavy rod, so you can get that penetration into the jig there. And another thing is just like it's just experimentation with it. Experimenting with different type of trailers and colors, like we just talked about. A lot of times, just a simple adjustment in a trailer size or profile makes a big difference. And that's just a few of the things that come off the top of my mind. The reason a lot of people struggle with jigs, but don't give up on them, man. Guys, if you have tried jigs and you haven't done that good, just keep trying with them, because man, it's just such a great lure to fish once you sort of master it. And also, guys, if you look in my playlist, I've got a bunch of jig videos in there. You can refer back to the playlist on my jig videos and get some good info there. So talk to you guys later. See you.